Coming here today, my challenge was to find a way to connect with each and every one of you and to tell you a story on how I became an architect of human bridges. Because honestly, I never even knew what that meant, let alone I would be one. I mean, when I was growing up, I absolutely knew without a doubt that I needed to grow out of that stage quick. I think it was at the point I realized that my kneecaps were bigger than my legs, that something had to happen quick. When I was growing up, I absolutely knew without a doubt that I wanted to be this guy, professional skateboarder. So much so that I would spend all my free time skating around the neighborhood, learning how to do all these cool tricks. I envisioned myself traveling the world and hanging out with the guys that I read about in magazines. And for years, when I would go to sleep at night, sometimes I actually dreamed of this awesome life. I'll tell you, in one of those dreams, I was skating in the driveway at my father's house, and I remember it was a summer day. I can feel the warmth of the sun on me. I can smell the freshly cut grass. I could even smell the laundry detergent on the clothes hanging on the line as I was doing all these spectacular tricks that no one else in the world could do. And even though I couldn't see my father, I can sense his presence. That's how real this dream was. When I woke up from that amazing dream, it was the middle of the night. Dazed from being in such a deep sleep, I slowly sat up, put both feet on the floor, rubbed the back of my neck, and when I looked down, I noticed that my other hand was gripping the mattress like a vice. Although it had taken me a few moments, I was now fully awake and back in reality, a painful reality. I was 27 years old and 5 years in on a 30-year prison sentence. Although I had these aspirations as an adolescent to be this famous skateboarder, my life from the age of 17 to 22 was nothing even close to that. I was a kid with no direction. I struggled to find an identity. And I was so naive and impressionable that the choices I made put me on a path of a downward spiral of a violent and criminally dangerous life. From the people I associated with, car thefts, robbery, police chases, bank robbery, and ultimately someone losing their life as a result of my knowingly negligent and criminal actions. For my crimes, the judge handed down a 30-year maximum sentence in the state correctional facility. At that time, I should have just threw away the key. My home now was a 6-foot by 9-foot concrete cell. Protruding on one side of the wall was a thin, solid sheet of steel. On top of it lay a 2-inch thick piece of foam, my bed for the next 30 years. Directly across on the other side of the wall, a small stainless steel sink with a toilet attached. The same toilet I would wash my clothes in for the next 30 years. A barred window where I can stare out and count the bricks on the wall of the cell block next to me for the next 30 years. And in the corner, a tiny metal table with a stool where I can sit and ponder my life for the next 30 years. Everything in that cell was more than I deserved. When they first put me behind the walls of the penitentiary, I remember standing outside in the recreational yard, looking around at my new life. A life that wasn't much different than I was already used to, except now I would be surrounded by and living with more than 2,500 other convicted felons of various crimes, ranging from drugs, burglary, robbery, rape, murder, and so much more. serving sentences of 5 years to life in prison, hardened convicts who already had 20 or 30 years in. And here I am, a kid, coming into their world. As I looked around this dejected sea of hopelessness, violence, and negativity, I closed my eyes and I thought to myself, is this going to be the rest of my life? Is this going to be me? And as I had these thoughts, something happened. Something happened in me. An awakening. And when I opened my eyes, I saw two paths in front of me. One, I can continue to live my life the way I had been living it that ultimately brought me to prison. And in the slimmest of chances they ever decided to let me out, that's when I'll make the effort to change. That's when I will show the world what I am capable of. Or I can start now and forge my commitment to change in here. And if I can do it behind these walls for decades upon decades, then there wasn't anything I can do beyond those same walls. That day, I made one of the most pivotal decisions of my life. I chose the road less traveled. And so over the course of the next 13 years, I spent taking advantage of all the educational and vocational opportunities that the state had offered. From collaborating with a local community college, to work towards a degree in business management, to attending and graduating culinary school, and attaining multiple certifications in various vocational trades. While in prison, I also began to read and study human behavior. I watched the interactions between the staff and the inmates. I spoke to hundreds upon hundreds of men who were released and had reoffended, and to those who had served a significant amount of time for a violent offense, such as myself. I chronicled countless pages of notes. What I found were several common themes. One of them being societal stigma of incarceration. I heard stories of how no one wanted to hire someone with a violent criminal background, let alone just released from prison, or how they felt unfairly judged by society because of how they looked just coming out of jail or of their past. But the truth is, the U.S. Department did a study for 9 years of state prisoner recidivism across 30 U.S. states. And would you believe that violent offenders were the least likely to reoffend when compared to other individuals who had been convicted of drug, property, and public order crimes? Even though the statistics were in my favor, I knew that public perception was not. And I would be facing the same obstacles, breaking through the barriers that society places on individuals who have been incarcerated, especially violent offenders. My challenge was to debunk the stereotype that we cannot be successfully reformed, could not be reintegrated back in the community, and to prove that we can become contributing members of society. As crazy as it sounds, being locked away in a tiny concrete cell of a closed environment behind the walls of a penitentiary allowed me to look at the world from the outside in. There was no internet, no cell phones, no accessibility to the technological advancements that are so readily available to the population today. Everything, and I mean everything, is stripped down to its rawest form. For me, my confinement was a time of enlightenment. discovery, and of personal growth, which allowed me to find an identity and also to develop and refine a series of core practices and principles that I could apply to my everyday life and use to build relationships outside of those walls. Just a few of them are understanding the differences between subjective and objective thinking, constructive and destructive criticism, and how to be versatile in different environments. Also, the importance of foundational building. What is foundational building? I'll tell you what it's not. It's not some complex mathematical formula that takes months or even years to figure out. In a nutshell, it's human interaction and building relationships based on genuine interest and not personal benefit. It's taking the time to not be so consumed with ourselves, but to expand with others. I quickly realized that this could go way beyond me wanting to make a positive impact in the world. That it doesn't matter if someone's been in prison or they never even seen the inside of a jail before. The idea and its true purpose is within each and every one of us. We all have some type of barrier, stereotype, judgment, or vulnerability that we feel within ourselves or with others. And through the practice of foundational building and authentic human interaction, we can eventually break through those. But wait, how does that even sound? A convicted murderer coming out of prison after almost a decade and a half, saying to the world, "Hey everyone, listen to me. I have the keys to unlock your potential." You think I was crazy? I think I was crazy. I foresaw this. My solution was time. Time to test my theories. And so, after almost 15 years, I was granted an early release and spent the next year after year after year building old and new relationships, meeting people. I got to learn them for who they are, and I allowed them to get to know me for who I am now. My actions were congruent to how I spoke and lived my life. And the more that I effectively communicated with others, the more I felt comfortable sharing my past with them. But here's the key. They also felt comfortable enough to open themselves up to me. That is how I became an architect of human bridges. I can honestly stand up here and say that over the course of my release, nearly every single person that I have shared my story with through this simple practice of foundational building has only allowed our relationship to grow stronger. From affluent members of society to judges, CEOs, even the deputy district attorney who prosecuted me is to this day one of my closest friends and strongest supporters. How wild is that? But most important, I built relationships with people just like you, proving that this simple practice of foundational building works. Earlier, you were able to hear who I was as a teenager with dreams, a real person, and then my decline, how I chose to spend my imprisonment and the transformation that followed to where we are today. I designed and built an honest relationship with you. Had I not laid the framework first, you may have been more inclined to associate a stigma, to pass a judgment, or to even express disdain. Do you want to hear the best part about all this? It doesn't end with me. It starts today with each and every one of you. And so, from one architect to another, I ask you, take the time to look within yourself and how you engage with others on a daily basis. Maybe meet for the first time or haven't seen in years. Value and appreciate the human experience. Cultivate and grow it. And remember this, we are all architects of our own design. Our level of vulnerability with others is dependent on how we choose to build the foundation of the bridges for which we shall let them cross. How many bridges will you choose to build today?